goes behind the trillion-dollar business of sports marketing, deal-making, law, business. All of the issues that impact the X's and O's, frankly, more issues here than the normal X's and O's. Starting with the NFL draft, by the way, we'll give you a number of different perspectives, including an interesting take on a business that may ultimately increase the speed of healing for some of our biggest nagging injuries, a company called Embody. We'll get into that in a few minutes as we deal with the NFL draft. But first, 15 to watch, 5 top tech, 5 top social media issues. If you want to see the list of our top 3, look at us on CSN Washington, NBCWashington.com, Mid-Atlantic, all of the NBC family of networks as well. You can relate back to HorrowSports.com at Rick Horrow. We have the full list summarized on our podcast as well. We go beyond those stories. If you want to subscribe to us on Apple Podcast, Audio Boom, Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes feed, all of those networks. We'll deal with all of that. Well, first we'll deal with the NFL and the NFL draft. We'll talk about our interview with Jeff Conroy, the founder of Embody. Great tease, but we'll get to that in a minute. The NFL draft, now then less than a week away, the Arlington and Dallas, Texas, both preparing for a windfall of cash. The event will provide more than $100 million in economic impact, and the 2017 draft in Philly, which was the first of its kind held outdoors, resulted in about $250,000 attendees and about $84 million of economic impact, beating initial projections by $14 million. The event marks the first time the draft will be held at an NFL stadium, and as usual, with Jerry Jones in charge, will utilize the field, the stands, and outdoor plazas, creating an all-encompassing atmosphere, enabling more fans than ever before to watch their favorite team's selection. Past drafts held at hotels and auditoriums, so it'll be interesting to see if this year's
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
Approach stacks up given the economic impact predictions. Probably should. Specific players in the draft, here's an interesting note. Lamar Jackson won't sign with an agent prior to. Multiple reports say the 2016 Heisman winner instead relies on the rookie wage scale. During 2011 CBA negotiations, the NFLPA agreed to implement a rookie wage scale as to a means of transferring wealth. At least 47% of all revenue, by the way, from unproven prospects to deserving veterans. To prevent training camp holdouts, rookie contracts simplified and deal terms and compensation became largely fixed. Guaranteed money negotiable. Jackson, a projected first-round pick, decided with little room for negotiation in his rookie contract, he'd forego signing with an agent, opting to hire a contract attorney to review the team's language. And should Jackson be selected in the first round as expected, he'll save a minimum of $250,000 in agent fees, a number that could reach $400,000 if he's indeed chosen by Arizona with the 15th pick. Why have NFL veterans pushed for a rookie wage scale? Well, 2 words. Sam Bradford. In 2010, he received $50 million guaranteed as the top overall draft pick, becoming the first player in league history to reach that compensation mark before taking a pro snap. And in 2011, Cam Newton signed a fully guaranteed deal worth $22 million as the number 1 pick. In a league where the average career is just 3.3 years, the biggest deals should be awarded players who have proven their worth, and that's what the structure does here. Look at specific markets. How about Jacksonville? Jaguars unveil plans for a new $2.5 billion development in their hometown. The brand new skyline-defining neighborhood will start near the football stadium and eventually extend all the way to the St. Johns River, with high-rise buildings containing hotels, offices, residential space, and a convention center. The club not yet announced the timetable for the project, though part of the team owner Shad Khan's grand plan to transform and build up the shipyards, Metropolitan Park land across the street from the field itself. One thing for a local football team to invest in downtown Jacksonville, Jaguars president Mark Lamping said. A totally different thing for the internationally known, nationally recognized developer to take a look at Jacksonville and also say, you know what? I think you have potential. The Jaguars will partner with Baltimore-based Cordish on the project. The latest development continues the pattern of Jags owner Shad Khan investing in big dollars in innovation, not only for his team and facility, but the surrounding community. Other NFL issues as well. For example, got some big charitable issues. But first, let's start with a little bit of fun. New England Patriots star and tight end Rob Gronkowski recently bought a stake in a special Kentucky Derby horse. Guess what it's called? Gronkowski. According to ESPN.com, the human Gronk recently partnered with the Phoenix Thoroughbreds Ltd. to acquire a substantial stake in the 3-year-old colt Gronkowski. The horse is a winner and I love a winner, Gronk, the person, said. When I heard about the racehorse being named after me, I started watching and got really stoked when he started winning. He's won his last 3 races, now headed to the Derby. I'm all in. Welcome to the Gronk family. I wonder if Gronkowski the horse knows this. The colt is the son of champion Horrow, Australia's racehorse of the year, 2003-2004, and purchased for about $400,000 by Phoenix last year as an unraced 2-year-old in training. Financial terms of the deal with the human Gronk not disclosed. The 144th Run for the Roses takes place May 5. The accompanying pageantry and $400 million in regional economic impact. Well, how about what the NFL is doing as far as its own marketability? According to Boston Globe, the start times for Thursday, Sunday, and Monday night games all being adjusted in advance of the season. The most significant change will be Monday Night Football, now kicking off at 8:15 instead of 8:30. The weekly Sunday night game, 8:20 instead of 8:30. Thursday night, 8:20, up 5 minutes from last year. The new schedule direct action as part of the league's ongoing initiative to speed up the game while also drawing in more viewers. NFL working on keeping people tuned in for the entirety of games, whether the ensuing people and ensuring people on the West Coast can get home for a 5:30 p.m. kickoff and the kids not staying up past midnight with school the next day. Kind of hard to balance, but the NFL is trying, making it easier for kids to view games, critical to building its next generation of fan base. Now we'll talk about NFL charity. According to Sports Business Journal, Houston Texans defensive end J.J. Watt, usually in the news for his on-field performances, noted by Time and its amazing efforts off the field. $37 million for hurricane recovery efforts after Harvey devastated Houston. He helped deliver water, food, and supplies to storm victims, lifting the spirits of most impacted by the natural disaster. Every few years, a pro athlete touches the heart and soul of a city in a way that makes it nothing to do with athleticism, said Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner. Also making the exclusive list, in part for his philanthropic efforts, Golden State Warriors forward Kevin Durant. This past year, Durant committed $10 million to college track programs to help disadvantaged kids receive higher education, to building and renovating basketball courts around the world so at-risk youth can have a safe place to learn and play. How about Colin Kaepernick? London-based human rights organization Amnesty International, by the way, gave Colin Kaepernick its Ambassador of Conscience Award. And over the weekend, his former teammate and free agent safety Eric Reed presented Kaepernick with the award during a ceremony in Amsterdam. According to the Associated Press, Kaepernick said racialized oppression and dehumanization is woven into the very fabric of our nation, the effects of which can be seen in the lawful lynching of black and brown people by the police and the mass incarceration of black and brown lives in the prison industrial complex. Pretty strong words, but obviously he is incredibly intense. Well, the draft is coming up, and we've got another perspective on it. Much of it talks about character, performance, but it's hard to predict the future. And it's even harder to predict recovery from injury and how expedited it can be, especially if you're out with ostensibly season-ending injuries like Achilles tears and rotator cuff tears as well. The intersection of sports and business brings us a company called Embody and its founder Jeff Conroy, raising $3 million of convertible debt and about $700,000 for the next investment to create an intersection of biology and biometrics. It's a scaffold for Achilles to repair comprised type 1 polymer and telecollagen, targeting Achilles as the first entry and then rotator cuff. We're going to let the guy explain it. But also, he raised a significant amount of money from DARPA, the agency from the federal government that also funds projects involving Navy SEALs and others. It is a big vision company, a great entrepreneur, and given the fact that the NFL draft is effectively a crapshoot, but the athlete injuries are certainly very important, a company that's scalable not only to deal with athletes.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
On the professional level, but you and me, the Weekend Warriors, certainly is worth noting. Here is Jeff Conroy. Rick Horrow inside the boardroom, Beyond the Scoreboard, and sometimes we just mix it up with sports and marketing. Now we're going to talk a little medical. All right, it's not going to be technical because there's a sports and a business angle to this, and if you listen carefully and you've had an injury of any kind, especially with tendons and all those kind of things that lawyers don't understand, you better listen to this, because this is not only going to help your quarterback who has torn an Achilles, but every human being down the road. Jeff Conroy, CEO, founder, Embody. How's that for an introduction of the company? Absolutely. So a little bit of sports and medicine and business. Tell me a little bit about your background. Obviously, how does a former president of a tissue bank begin to create a business that may revolutionize how people heal?
Yeah, no, great question. You know, my experience in learning the sports medicine business was in how donor tendons and products that are manufactured from cadavers end up used in surgical procedures and put into our bodies. And I I really looked at a lot of that experience as saying there had to be a better way to engineer purpose-built products that would be more high performance, and as opposed to if you have an ACL replacement and you have to have the tendon of a 70-year-old donor who probably died from cardiovascular or diabetes diseases, those aren't exactly high performance parts to put into an athlete. And so one of the things that struck me in looking at ways to approach building a company to focus on those things was really looking at some of the most high performance athletes in the world, which are elite warfighters. And when you've got Navy SEALs, Green Berets, all kinds of technical special operations forces, and we've got a lot of parallels, certainly not parallels in terms of the danger or the consequences, but in terms of athletes who are driven and who constantly are faced with injuries, debilitating injuries, which could be career-ending. There's a lot of parallels in accelerating recovery. So that's kind of a long answer to, I was looking for ways to find technology that we could leverage that would really just be cutting edge, advanced. How do we harness the body's own healing properties and potential, and how do we avoid using cadaver parts and in surgical repair, and how do we move to a future where bioengineering, biomaterials, advanced manufacturing drive these opportunities.
So before we get to the business part, now's the hard part, because I'm going to ask you to explain it in a way that humans can understand. This is not your dad's replacement surgery. The idea of producing scaffolds for Achilles repair as well as other opportunities in the body is something unique and is a very important part of your differentiation. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, exactly. So the whole idea here is that we've chosen, and in terms of building blocks of products, we've tried to use proteins and collagen specifically, and collagen that's clinical grade and used in medical devices, to be able to engineer these scaffolds, which are really cell-friendly environments. So if you've torn an Achilles tendon and you're going to have a surgical repair to reinforce and restore your biomechanical strength or just your function, our collagen scaffolds would be wrapped around that surgical repair, and they actually provide a pro-healing environment where your own cells in the body migrate into those scaffolds, and they attach and they infiltrate and they stimulate your own new tissue to grow. So new tendon-like tissue grows over the surgical repair. And the whole idea is just, if we can use regenerative medicine to accelerate new tissue growing at the site of a surgical repair, we've got a real chance at reducing rehab and putting athletes of all kinds in a position to recover pre-injury performance, come back faster, come back with the same skills you had previously.
So just quickly, so people can visualize it, this is a medical term, I guess, in a way, but you think of a scaffold as like a little ladder, right? And the stuff grows on that ladder and heals you faster. Is that right, or am I totally wrong?
Absolutely. I mean, the best way to describe it is your Achilles tendon. Your Achilles looks like a bundle of dry spaghetti. All high performance fibers all running in the same direction. So we build a scaffold out of microfibers that are aligned in the same direction, and we wrap it around in that surgical repair. And it really is when the native cells in your body find that scaffold, they're in a familiar environment, so they don't turn into scar tissue. They're stimulated to stretch and turn into new tendon-like tissue.
Ladies and gentlemen, I bet you didn't think on a sports business show you're going to hear the analogy between an Achilles tendon and some dry spaghetti, but here we are. So, listen, the other piece of this is from a business perspective for professional and college and high-performance athletes. We'll get to you and me later. But healing process, I know you are very circumspect at over-promising and under-delivering, so you can't get specific on this, but say a quarterback tears his Achilles, and it's 15, 16, 17 months before he's even back. What's the prognosis under this scheme?
Well, great question, and these are things that we will prove out in human trials after we get to market. And so I have to be careful about claims. I think one of the goals that we're really focused on is really reducing the recovery time, and one of the things you need to do is get back to natural movement after that repair. So instead of what we hope to prove is that you can greatly reduce the boot time, the isolation time that you have, where that tendon is not moving after surgery. And we hope to say instead of 8 or 12 weeks, maybe we can get the patient out of the boot in 6 weeks. That's one objective. And the second objective is that you've got, by stimulating these new cells to grow and new tissue, you're recellularizing and reanimating that surgical repair. And we're gonna do trials in athletes at a couple of large medical centers here in the Southeast, and we'll be proving that out. But I mean, clearly it's hard in an FDA regulated environment to make too many claims about what we can do for quarterbacks. But we really believe, and one of the reasons that the Department of Defense and DARPA in particular funded us was that there's got to be a better solution here than the scarring that occurs following some of the current repairs that are done. And what we can say about a quarterback is, look, putting this kind of a product into that repair site is going to minimize the scarring. If we minimize the scarring, we're going to accelerate the rehab. We're going to push them to get back and give them the confidence to get back as soon as possible. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, answer the question as well as you can under the current business circumstances, which is really important. And from a business show perspective, let's talk about that side of the world. You mentioned DARPA a couple of times. Tell us a little bit about that program and what it is and why it's been so important to your development.
No, fantastic. The Department of Defense has an agency called DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and DARPA is the moonshot factory of the DoD, and so the internet was created from DARPA. Drones and robots are created through DARPA funding, and we've spent, it's a highly competitive process, and we made a case to these folks that restoring these elite warfighters to service faster and with pre-injury performance levels capable of being recovered was a priority, and they agreed. A special operations warrior, a Navy.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
SEAL or Green Beret are multi-million-dollar assets, and returning them to service following things like soft tissue injuries. Fully a third of the injuries are some of the most prevalent injuries that Special Operations Forces face are Achilles, rotator cuff, and ACL. And so DARPA's mandate is to advance the standards across the board and in terms of how technology impacts warfighters. And this happens to be one that's focused on health in terms of restoring performance following tendon and ligament injuries. We're funded under a program called Atoms to Products, which is really looking at things at the nanoscale and engineering solutions, and really lots of smart physicists and biologists and biomaterials experts, both in DARPA and on my team, who've had the chance to collaborate. So it's been a fantastic experience.
It's ironic that Navy SEALs and the improvement of their lot helped the next generation of Dan Marinos and Richard Shermans and the other folks that tear their Achilles or any other body parts from the NFL and other sports. Quite fascinating. And just so we know how far you've come, I don't know if you're prepared to tell us how much DARPA has actually funded you guys. It's significant. Can you give us the number, or do you just want to give us a range? I mean, you're free to do it.
Great question. Our DARPA program has been funded at $12 million over the last 4 years. We still have another year and a half to go of that funding. We've been very successful in raising some other grant funding, several $1 million through some programs in the state of Virginia. And we're also working with the Army, we're working with the Navy, we're working with some NIH groups, and all kinds of ways to put together non-dilutive funding. And then on the investment funding side, we continue to raise money like any small startup looking to become a growth stage company. We're effectively constantly raising funding, and we just started at the beginning of this year, and it's been going very well.
And so the idea of insurance companies with the pharmacoeconomic studies and teams and leagues on the professional level, I assume they're all supportive of you because less injuries help everybody?
Oh, absolutely. And player health is a priority. I think we, in the YouTube or Instagram or constant media is constantly available, we see too many Achilles injuries or compound fractures on TV, and I think player health and the ability of these players to recover from these injuries, it's a priority of everyone in the chain, from the players to the owners to the leagues and the players associations. And we've seen that. I mean, we've had a chance to meet with some of the folks from the NBA and also some of the folks in the NFL, and player health is a clear priority.
Final question or set of questions that I think everybody wants to know is, assuming successful scaling, when is this technology available for the general public and the weekend warrior? At what extent, and how long will it take?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Our plan is to launch our Achilles product by the end of next year, and towards the end of next year in the fourth quarter. So we will be seeking FDA approval and getting commercial. And what's great about the path that we've had to market is it's available to any sports medicine patient the day that it's available for a Navy SEAL or a quarterback. And so the idea here is we will be commercial next year with this Achilles product. We're working on the same type of product for the rotator cuff in the shoulder. We're also developing one of the first resorbable internal braces, kind of if you have a strain in an ACL and you want to put a high performance suture through it to reinforce that. We're doing one out of 100% collagen, and then longer term for us, we're looking to build ACLs that are just fully engineered, all made from collagen. We're building some fibers that are as strong as steel in our labs here, and so the future is really, I won't go to a cadaver for an ACL repair, even for a weekend warrior, or I won't have to have a second surgery and take part of your patella tendon or part of your hamstring to rebuild your ACL. And so that's the goal for us longer term, will be in the ACL replacement business.
Quite clearly, all I need to do with my tattered body is to stay one step near your medical marvels, and with Jeff Conroy running the show, it ought to happen. Rick Horrow, speak with you soon. Well, Jeff Conroy gives us a pretty unique perspective, and it certainly is a company worth watching. Let's talk about some other sports, though, as we head away from the draft. By the way, believe it or not, there are some other issues, like golf. National Golf Day held on Wednesday, celebrating the $4 billion in charitable economic impact and the $70 billion that impacts the economy. The golf business impacts 1 in 75 U.S. jobs, 38.5 million people interested in golf, and a golf study that was released this week talks about impact well beyond the study that was released in 2011. National Golf Day shaping up to be the most successful and largest to date. 230 members of Congress, 235 attendees from 40 U.S. states, attendees of the conference visiting 80 of the 100 Senate offices and 145 House offices. Industry leaders meet with members of Congress, the executive branch, and federal agencies to discuss golf's nearly 15,000 diverse businesses, 2 million jobs impacted, tax revenue creation, and tourism. Let's shift to baseball. The Oakland A's had 46,000 people for a game against the White Sox, but they gave away all the tickets. They were so thrilled with the turnout that they want to do it again. 46,000 people turned out for the event. 200,000 initially requested from 35,000 accounts, averaging between 5 and 6 tickets per account. MLB not really recognizing this as official home game because no official attendance calculations based on giveaway. It's all based on paid attendance. And it's certainly a positive experience for the A's that could be replicated in the future, but it does little to mask the team's looming issue of finding a new stadium or significantly renovating the Coliseum, but at least it puts the Bay Areas on notice that the A's are charitable and moving forward. And speaking of up the coast, an ownership group in Portland recently met privately with city officials about bringing another MLB team to the Pacific Northwest. According to the Oregonian, two sides discussed plans for a downtown ballpark, 2 specific sites being floated. No official plans for either expansion or relocation been stated by MLB, Though Rob Manfred did mention last year that Portland would be on a list of potential expansion cities. A ballpark in Portland would include funding from a $150 million grant that was approved by the state back in 2003 when the Expos were exploring relocation. The ownership group, named the Portland Diamond Project, formed by former Nike executive Craig Cheek, who sought to raise $6 million, already sold equity worth $500,000 to two unnamed investors. The group currently exploring stadium site options, but before it moves on to anything else. Finally, on the baseball front, Oriole Park at Camden Yards has to do some catching up. Those of us in the Mid-Atlantic would know this, according to the Baltimore Sun. The O's fans have been complaining for seasons about their cellular networks being overtaxed and slowed down because of the amount of people at the ballpark. 2012, 20 MLB teams joined a consortium with baseball to help the sport through its Wi-Fi and other high-tech communication options. The Orioles are looking at their own things, upgrading concession areas, suites, and other parts of the stadium. Obviously, the Orioles need to know and understand how important it is to generate some significant interest inside the stadium, and we're sure this will be one of their moves in the future. Finally, let's talk about soccer. 2018 version of the International Champions Cup set to feature 18 of the world's top soccer clubs. According to published reports, each of the 18 teams play 3 games across the United States, Europe, and Singapore, matches starting merely days after the 2018 World Cup final in Russia. Some of the USO stadiums, Hard Rock in Miami, Rose Bowl in Pasadena, MetLife in New York, and Michigan Stadium in Ann Arbor. Of the clubs traveling around the world to play the exhibition tournament, Spanish clubs Real Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus, and AS Roma from Italy, Man City, Man U, Chelsea, Liverpool from England. Last year's group of 15 combined for a market value of nearly $9 billion, while this year's number is certainly higher with more clubs involved. The success of the tournament largely thanks to Miami Dolphins owner Steve Ross, who's contributed over $100 million of his own money to getting the ICC up and running. Expansion side of LAFC and the MLS, the stadium officially open. According to the Los Angeles Times, Bank of California Stadium, the $350 million open-air stadium finished ahead of schedule and budget in only 17 months. Facility marks one of the 16 soccer-specific stadiums across the league, also being the most expensive one in MLS history, and the first open-air pro sports venue built in LA since Dodger Stadium in 1962. The 22,000-seat venue already drawing rave reviews as the standard for what a new soccer stadium should be in the U.S. Built just outside of downtown L.A., fans sitting in the upper bowl have a direct and unobstructed view of the skyline from their seats and how steep the bowl is. It's exceeded expectations, LAFC owner Peter Guber said. You walk through here and you look at it and you'll say, I want to live here. Like New York, L.A.'s diversity allows for the peaceful coexistence of multiple pro sports franchises, even those within the same sport. And then, speaking of New York, having played all of their home games at Yankee Stadium since joining the MLS as an expansion club years ago, NYCFC finally calls for a 26,000-seat stadium along the Harlem River Yards as part of a larger Empire State Development Corp plan for mixed-use development. The $75 million stadium would take up a fraction of the whole $700 million development plan, which calls for building 550 affordable housing units and a waterfront park. If approved, the entire project would be completed by 2020.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
22. New York City FC proposed an initial set of plans last year to build a soccer stadium on the Queens site and Belmont Park, but lost out to the NHL's Islanders. The club's plans call for paying $500,000 per year for a 99-year lease, effectively cementing them as the team of the area and proving that even with more than 10 pro sports teams in New York, it's possible for each to stand out and command audience share. Kind of like what the LA deal did. Finally, this isn't soccer, but this is international. Let me end with a very interesting note. And all of you esports fans, unite. The potential of adding esports to the Olympics seeming more likely going forward. IOC President Thomas Bach already ruled out the option of including any games with violent or discriminatory content. And according to Reuters, esports currently has an estimated 250 million players worldwide, giving them a huge fan base across the globe already. Bach wants to ensure that no games added to the Olympic mix would be offensive for anyone watching. We have to draw a very clear red line in this respect, and that red line would be games with killer content or the promotion of violence or anything into the Olympics. They can never be recognized as part of the Olympic movement. They have to be contrary to our values and our principles. The Olympics have been working on ways to attract younger athletes with the inclusion of esports, as long as they do it right. We'd like to thank Dan Martin and Tanner Simpkins for helping to put this podcast together as always. We'd like to thank Jeff Conroy for explaining his concept of Embody to us as far as injury prevention is concerned. We'd like to thank you for listening and watching, and we have more post-draft issues and NBA, NHL playoffs coming up next week as we go beyond the scoreboard.